Anyone who believes in indefinite growth on a physically finite planet is either mad or an economist.
We don't want to focus politics on a notion that involves the rejection of principles around which a large majority of our fellow citizens organize their lives.
We are not as endlessly manipulable and as predictable as you would think.
What do I mean by finding true north? I mean a world in 2050 where 9 billion people can live well, where we can live within environmental limits and resource constraints, where we've eradicated extreme hunger and poverty, where we've universal primary education and maternal health, and where we have reliable access to safe, clean drinking water and safe, clean energy. In other words, I think a fairer, greener, more resilient and more inclusive capitalism. And I think that capitalism needs to be enabled by a new model for growth, for prosperity and for development, decoupled from the overuse and the abuse of natural resources and the environment. And this evening, what I want to do is to reflect specifically on the role of business in setting us on this pathway to true north, drawing in particular on a program of research that I've been conducting now for 10 years for the UN Secretary General, first for Kofi Annan and more recently for Ban Ki-moon, which looks at trying to help the UN leadership understand the changing nature of business in society and business attitudes, particularly chief executives' attitudes to sustainability and how those are changing over time. And over the course of that 10 years, we have had responses from more than 2,000 CEOs across more than 120 countries, across 25 industries, and had one-to-ones with more than 200 chief executives to try and get underneath the skin of what they mean by sustainability in the past, present and future of sustainability. And I think that the transformation gap really became apparent to myself and my team when we sat down and reflected on the 10 years of experience of engaging these CEOs on sustainability. And as we reflected on, in particular, the 2010 study, we reflected on the gap between the transformation that the scientific intelligence that we have globally and the economic evidence out there around issues like climate change. We reflected on what they told us would be required to foster a sustainable economy and the pathway that business was on in comparison to that sustainable pathway. And I think it would be fair to say that that pathway is best described not as heading north, but heading south. A trajectory where we will need 2.3 planets worth of ecological resources to support a global population of 9 billion by 2050, where we face a 40% shortfall in water between forecast global demand and available supply by 2030, and where we know that demand for food will grow by 70% by 2050 at the same time as the rate of growth in agricultural yields is dropping annually. In other words, the gap between systemic change, a radical reshaping of structures and systems that can deliver prosperity and livelihoods, and the enthusiastic pursuit of mitigation and incremental achievement that seems to be the hallmark of most companies' approach to sustainability. Our 2010 study, which we called A New Era of Sustainability, was at the time the largest CEO study conducted on sustainability. And the tenor of the conversations, in the main, was unremittingly positive. So 93% of chief executives that we spoke to told us that sustainability would be important or very important to the future success of their business. And the majority anticipated a new era within 10 years where sustainability would be embedded in core business. I think they felt that despite a recognition that there were everyday challenges of competing priorities. Sustainability is not the only agenda item that most executives have to deal with, but that market forces would lead companies and industries to embed sustainability at the heart of their businesses. So really setting us on a pathway towards the true north of a sustainable economy. But as we reflected on our conversations, we began to compare that bullishness that we heard with the realities that we were seeing in the marketplace. For the last 15 years, I've been focused on working on this agenda with executives around the world, and I think that what we see is the knotty, real-world, messy problems that they face in trying to tackle sustainability in our current economic structure. Watching climate change negotiations where for every step forward we seem to see 4 steps backwards. And perhaps strikingly, seeing companies garlanded and celebrated for the most incremental of achievements, cutting wastewater by 5%, increasing rates of recycling by 10%, or putting a woman on the board. And we need to be careful not to denigrate those actions, because these individual achievements, each of them incremental targets, were the result of smart, committed minds. I see that every day, dedicated to making a difference within their own spheres of influence. So these are not small things at the micro level, but collectively, consistently, we've gone overboard in our reception of their achievement. Instead of recognizing that each of these initiatives was a first step on a long road, in many cases, we rushed to claim that sustainability was now embedded